One such celestial horror is known but as a myth amongst the remaining civilized pockets of Nimbus, cast into many star cartographers' lost and unknown records. The body was named by early star cartographers as Upsilon Beta 1. An ancient and terrifying entity, it has been seen only twice since the warp storm Rho Mega 88 cut off Nimbus from Imperial rule. This orange giant has cast an ominous glare upon its parental body in the most dire of times, setting in motion events which would alter the path of the planet's destiny. So it is now that etched mausoleums, great murals, and intricate chronicles depict a deadly umber omen set to return upon a day of reckoning. An ancient and terrifying power now breaks its furthest elliptical and sets its path for home. The moon cults have given this great orb a name: Abzu.
My name's Colt. I have the account Into the Gray North on Instagram.
Is there a memory that comes to mind that sort of like pushed you into this branch of the hobby where it's more focused on kit bashing and world building and stuff like that?
Yeah, there's 2 points there that I should talk about. And, it's ever since I was a kid, it's kind of gradually spun up into this. But from my very first foray into war games, I had the second edition 40K box set, and I was already kit bashing the Blood Angels within that. I don't recall I did with orcs. I think I had like a custom buggy that I made as a kid, but I was taking bits and pieces off of other things and throwing them on the Blood Angels and painting them a totally different color. So yeah, I've been kit bashing since I was in the hobby, even with follow-up armies. I was always trying to make them a little bit different flavor. It was right around the time, it had been 2017, I think, 16 or 17. And it was when I finally just, the light bulb clicked. It was like, okay, there's a following behind this. People are doing this now. And so I feel like that's the point I hopped on board behind kind of the underground 28 scene. And I don't even remember if we were calling it that back then. It was War Boss Kurgan with Tor Megiddo and the Iron Sleet crew, Mixula, Colty with their Thorns Moon Crusade just blew my mind. And the pictures of Tor Megiddo I think they played that at Adepticon one year.
They look so amazing, the like giant walking machine things.
Yeah.
Those are so sick.
Yeah. And I was like, at the time I was trying to convince my partner, I was like, I need to make one of these things. And she was like, we live in a studio in a high rise. Where are you going to put that thing? And I was like, yeah, fair enough. So, the progression of me always wanting to kind of make something my own, put my own little spin on it. And I've always kind of pushed back against that Games Workshop mentality of paint by numbers. And I think that's what lends itself so well to the twin community is I think we're a little punk rock in that sense of we want to do our own thing. We don't want somebody to tell us what we have to play or how we have to play it. And ultimately that's how I shape my hobby around that idea is I'm going to do what I want, what appeals to me and how I want to.
Is Salvatore 28, is that your first world that you kind of designed?
Actually, I did a local one right before that kind of fell flat on its face. It was called the Northwest Passage. It was about if we circumnavigated the warp rift going on and went up there in the galactic rim where it's just pirates and all sorts of stuff. There's this little pocket up there where like there's all these little independent kingdoms and pirate worlds and stuff. And so I try to get a local crew going for that. And like I said, it kind of fell flat on my face. But that taught me a very valuable lesson is you really have to have people of like mind because these were not people that knew anything about the 28 community or had that reference in their brain. So it when I was trying to explain to them what was going on with this, it just didn't register. And so that told me, you don't have to go big, you don't have to go grand, which I still do, but you need to find your crew and the people who have similar thoughts of what this hobby is to them. And once you do that, as with other projects I've done with Abzu in particular, is just, it flows when you find people of like mindset, and it makes a story building effort, a campaign, a game, an invitational all the much easier.
Can you describe Salvatore 28?
So Salvatore is Italian for savior. And it is, the premise of it, it's really, it's a love note to all the things I'm passionate about and that have inspired me throughout my life, be it military history, music, movies, art. And it's a world building effort that I've been working on for a few years, combining sci-fi, Baroque, feudal, and ancient elements, and really just to kind of create this unique visual storytelling experience in a way that I've always wanted to do.
If I'm on the planet and I'm just looking around, what's one thing that I would see that would really embody my experience on Salvatore?
Moons and thunderstorms. The moons don't rise in the east and set in the west. They rise wherever they want to and set wherever they want to, when they want to, as fast as they want to. There are different moons in different regions. So if you're in the nations of the east, you're going to see a different moon rise over there than you would the nations of the west. And that does have a little bit to do with the peoples that are there and the energies they're drawing on, depending on who they're loyal to and what they're doing in their makeup. But that is all a means of being able to, I hope, experiment with different lighting and different setups on the battlefield. I've invested in some really cool light setups that I'm looking forward to getting to use. And, I can generate some lightning on a tabletop now. I can generate a pink or a blue or a green or an orange moon. And it looks pretty rad. And I'm going to eventually utilize some photographers, or hopefully, try to get back into doing that. It's funny. That's one of those things that every time I get into it and then get out of it, I lose so much knowledge on photography. The moons are something that is, one, a creative way to get good shots, and two, I think it's just cool in the setting. And I'll say this too, I draw a lot of inspiration from home and my personal stuff. And so you're going to see grassy prairie lands and thunderstorms. The environment that I set it within is all very close, near and dear to me. I've tried to release fluff and the aesthetics on my Instagram over the years. I found that I need a central location for that. So I'm working on a lore lookbook right now, but really, again, it combines all those elements of what I've enjoyed and what I like, the storytelling, the aesthetic imagery, and that real visceral images of just big battlefields. And ultimately, I don't have a lot of that on my account right now. I'm working on it. I finally had to throw up just some gray images, which I'm really against, some gray plastic on my account. But I just wanted to show people what I'm working on, and those mass multitudes of pikes. Growing up being kind of a military history buff, loosely, I've always enjoyed the battlefield tactics, and we romanticize a little bit about it. I mean, we naturally do that in the war games that we play, or I do myself. The technology that has shaped the battlefield throughout the ages, and how people and generals and armies and nations really have committed themselves to learning and understanding and progressing that on the battlefield. The 30 Years' War and the wars for religion, the Italian wars, and all those things in Europe going on at the time. And what really seeded within me was, hey, black powder was coming from the east. It was coming prevalent on the battlefield. But then again, you've got these knights on horseback that are still charging headlong in these formations and these mass formations of gunpowder. And then here, lo and behold, here come the Swiss and the Germans pulling out a playbook right out of Macedonian history. It's the culmination of all these different time periods of technology. What do I do with this, And so that pushed me to go, hey, Colt, you've got all these historical miniatures. You've got all these sci-fi miniatures, all these different types of game systems that were up until that point just flavors of the month. And we do that. I think a lot of hobbyists do that. They go, "Oh, that's a cool game. I want to play that. Let's go buy $100 for miniatures."
Yeah.
And I was getting really worn out and tired of that. And I had stuff sitting in my hobby closet that I knew I was never going to get to. And I said, you know what? What if I just took all this and threw it together and kit bashed it and made it into an aesthetically similar setting? And that's what I'm doing. And so I've got, elements from Pike and Shot, some Napoleonics, all my sci-fi junk, and from 40K or Games Workshop and Forge World, and fantasy elements sprinkled into it now. And so now I get to use all my miniatures that I've ever collected and still try to collect. And I don't spend as much money as I used to. Yeah. That's kind of where that all blended together. And
despite being just like a hodgepodge, it does feel cohesive, like it's a place that I can get a sense of.
That's good. And I like hearing that, because I think I never know if what's going on in my brain can be portrayed in a certain fashion to folks. And for the most part, when I get to collaborating with people, and especially here in the past year since I've been doing it a lot more, I always have kind of an intro with them and explore the setting with them, because admittedly there's not a lot of literature out there on it yet. And it's funny how fast they kind of jump into it and they point something out and they're like, "Oh yeah, I got what you were saying with the moons," or this faction really hit me well because of this. And so I try to set myself like a left and a right limit, and I try to keep, especially when it comes to aesthetics, I try to take something and look at it and go, those fit, or no, those don't. Let's toss that idea. Let's get something else in here. And then as far as, that's actual miniatures on the tabletop pieces and whatnot. As far as storyline goes, I try to draw from inspiration and stories I've heard, whether it be, Shakespeare's Macbeth, or the Battle of Rocroi, or something that has stood out in my mind. I kind of take that and I'll start spinning on it in my head and saying, how can I put this into physical form on my battlefield? And then the final aspect of that, which is always my favorite, is I throw music and inject music into it. So I am one of those ones that every once in a while throw a podcast on or YouTube while I'm hobbying, but most of the time, I'd say 75% of the time, I've got music going in my ear while I'm hobbying. So I'm listening to an artist or a song, and I hear the lyrics, I hear the beats, I hear the melody. And funny enough, that goes so far into my setting.
Do you have some examples of artists that have particularly inspired the setting?
I'll premise by saying I'm very eclectic. I'll go from Metallica to Lady Gaga in a heartbeat, and I'll hear something in either genre, and I'll go, "Wow, that's really cool." But there's a band called Chemist that is on tour right now. Actually, they're a stoner metal band that I'm real fond of, and I remember hearing it. It was a few years ago. It's just this badass guitar solo that it comes right out of the gates and just punches you in the face. And I was just, the mental image of like this dude rocking out to this, no words, no lyrics until like 2 minutes into the song. But ever since I heard that first, that guitar riff, I've always imagined Salvatore having a very grand music presence in it. Yeah. And so I've always pictured that dude like up on some walker or platform playing his guts out, and this electric lightning storm behind him, and he just finally his head pops because he just can't contain the music. And that all plays out in the song. And I think, everybody hears those things differently, but at least to me, that gives me inspiration. And I've got pieces I'm working on for that. And funny enough, one of my factions in Salvatore is they're the feudal nation, feudal kingdom of Iber. I call them the Bereaved, and that is the Chemist's titled song, "The Bereaved," and it plays into their whole makeup, their whole faction style. their history and where they came from and where they're at now and how they're deeply seated in revenge. And so, yeah, that one song that I just, I jam out to in the shower all the time or on the hobby desk has created this whole faction narrative.
That's awesome.
So sometimes I have a rigid framework that I try to stay within, and then sometimes I'll just riff off a seed and put some metal miracle grow on it.
Oh yeah. What's the relationship of Abzu to Salvatore?
Moons is the relationship there, and a easy excuse for me to have a project to collaborate on. That was my first collaborative project with other folks, and Abzu was this really cool melding of ideas. It started back in, what was that, 21? Yeah, it was the Grimdark Film Club invitation was what it was. And this 2020, yeah, when we were all locked down. That's right. I remember this now. And I had this idea in my head. Well, Alprimus was saying Salvatore has no sun. It's ruled by its moons. But none of them are of its own elliptical orbit or its celestial body. They're all alien to the world. And there's some story behind that, but Abzu is a very powerful moon that has only orbited the planet twice in its long history since being cut off from the Imperium. And so I wanted it because I had seen a piece of artwork by, and I'm going to ruin his name, I always do, Batskinski, the European artist.
Amazing.
It was it's just every time I look at his stuff, it blows my mind. But he had a piece called AO, I believe it was, or AO. And it was just this huge monolithic structure. And looking at that for the first time and then seeing some of his other artwork, I had some ideas for that. And then this piece of an end table that was about to be thrown out, I said, oh my God, that's AO right there. And I just saw it immediately at that point. And I was like, I got it. I was like, you're not throwing this away. I'm keeping these two. And I still have it here. And I have its sister piece, which I hope to do something with one day. But Grimdark Film Challenge came up, and I immediately knew I needed a cast. And I think I can't remember who I reached out to first, but it was either Lunax 7070 or Shane or Chris Symptomatic Chaos. And both those guys I take a lot of inspiration from. I think Shane's his true scale Marines and Grey Knights are the best in the business. And
sure.
I'm always trying to mimic how he does that true scale look. But yeah, we started jamming, and he came up with this wild theory, something about a brown dwarf that was, and it had been debunked at this point. It was from the 80s, but they thought extinction level events, as far as like asteroids being pulled into the galactic rim and whatnot, were caused by a big, huge body orbiting or moving close to our galaxy, which and when you think about it, makes sense. And I said, that's wild, man, that you would even mention that. I hadn't thought about that for this project or my moons, but that is the exact same concept. And without me knowing that, Salvatore, and had all these different wild elliptical orbits. And ultimately I had thought they're being pulled in because we're in a warp storm or in some black hole or something, and they're being sucked in from other planets periodically. And so it just, like, our two minds were on the same page again. And I said, okay, cool, let's roll with it. And ultimately, this was a selfish excuse to get some of his Grey Knights into the picture. And I said, what if there's a brotherhood out there on the fringes and they fall upon this? And so we had that set. And then I reached out to Symptomatic Chaos, Chris, and said, hey man, because I was just jiving off of his miniatures at the time that he was coming up with. They were all wild. And I was like, hey dude, I got to have you make the cast for this. I want to do this little project. And he was all in. And so we started kind of doing our thing. I started building the board. I used an old Realm of the old Games Workshop plastic boards. And as we were doing this, I was pitching them an idea, like, how our crew gets to to this moon. How do they transport off of Nimbus, the planet, the linchpin planet of Salvatore, to this moon? I said, well, there's a couple movies that scared the shit out of me as a kid, and one of those was Event Horizon, and that image of Sam Neill sitting on that throne after he's ripped his eyes out and saying, "Where we're going, we won't need eyes to see," just gave me nightmares for years as a kid. And so I said, we're going to make the warp drive room, and they go discover this down ship, basically an Event Horizon ship locked in this mountain, and they'll get up there that way. And they're like, okay, cool, you're going to make this? I'm like, yeah, I'm going to try. I'm making the board and the monolith, but I'm going to make this too. Fast forward, I don't remember, maybe it was a week or two, but people started posting images of what their works in progress. And here's this dude, Gareth, at that Beyond the Light on Instagram. What is he making? He's making a damn warp drive room from the movie. And I was just awesome. Like, Chris, check this guy out. It's like, should we hit him up? Because I don't want to like double up. And ultimately, what he was working on was way better than the idea that I had. Because I was going to use that old Empire globe that rides on the carriage. I don't know, as a weapon or something. But Chris was like, yeah, dude, get him. So I reached out to Gareth, and Gareth's in the UK. So this threw in another and Gareth was all for it. He was like, hell yeah, let's do it. I love the idea. And so you're kind of getting that sense of, production timeline. And it's funny because I always saw that, you see the sequence of events in a movie, and you don't realize sometimes the very end is filmed before anything in the beginning, or vice versa. Different
Everything that's in the same room is shot the same day.
Yeah. And I didn't really comprehend that. I did a little stint film school in New York City and worked on a bunch of indie films and stuff, and got a lot of good ideas and experienced that. But that, day one is not going to be just the opening of the movie. It can be whatever point we need it to be. And so that kind of broke us of having to do things in order, and it ultimately has saved us a lot of money. But we got them. We got everything built, and it was there for a while. I know myself, I was a little worried if we're going to make it. And that's the great thing about working with good people in this whole community. They're all very supportive, and life got in the way, as it does for me. And I was really like, guys, I don't know if we're going to be able to finish this. I don't know if I can get this all done in time. And they're like, they were rooting me on and just like, hey man, we're going to make this. It's going to be badass. And we did. We made it happen. We submitted, and we had our little storyline. And Shane Lunax, he picked the soundtrack for it. I think it was a Charlize Theron movie where she's like an alien of some sorts. But he had this just badass idea for a song, and I had listened to that soundtrack before, and blew my mind, and it was perfect. We threw it up. All of us kind of did our own little story and threw it up on Instagram, and I kind of made a little production out of it. But it came together beautifully, and it was my first foray into collaboration. And I'm very appreciative of those guys, and I was just super humbled at their efforts. Also, I got to throw a credit to our post-production expert, Luke Martin, aka at Heretic on Instagram. I haven't talked to Luke in a while, but he is ultimately, kind of what glossed that over and put the cherry on top and made it what it is. So without your post-production or your digital artist, none of this stuff could happen.
Well, I think that's something that's really interesting about this project, because when I first saw it, what really blew my mind about it, well, I mean, obviously the stuff you made is just incredible. The tower is incredible. Lunax's like Space Marines are just always mind shredding. But like one thing that really just stood out to me was that you were taking the photograph seriously. It wasn't just like this artifact thing from a game. It wasn't just like, oh, I made this and then I just took a picture of it with my cell phone, or even with a nice camera. Like it's like it's almost like, to me, the end product of your work was those photographs. Like the models were made for the photographs, and the terrain was made for the photographs, and then the photographs themselves were edited and processed to be something special and unique in themselves. I've seen some people do some stuff like that, but that was the first time I've ever really seen it taken to this really like top tier, everything's executed at the highest level, like scope.
Yeah, I'll speak on that just a little bit because it scratches the surface a little deeper. Ultimately, that's why I'm in this. That's what I want to do. I do enjoy all the other facets we've talked about that I draw off of. I haven't played a lot. I mean, I've played maybe a handful of times in the past few years. I would like to get back to that point of playing games because I do love them so much. And there's so many great game systems out there that I want to try. But ultimately, I'm in this to produce and make productions like that, like Abzu. That's what I had in mind when I did this. And, I had some steam built up, ready to go for this. I had a really great little hobby room and little production room that I could do this in. And life as it does, just comes and smacks you in the face. And I went through, a couple of years there where I just hobby was minimal and I couldn't do it. And getting back to that now and building a lot of good steam. And I'll say my Instagram account, while not everything is top level, top production like Abzu, it's meant to be that because it's a look into my hobby. That's why it's at into the Great North. The production company ultimately would be the Great North, but that's why my name is what it is because you're getting a peek into the production and what I'm up to, what I'm doing. So, that's the basis of where I'm going with all of this. Is hopefully if life keeps me on this path and I can pump out some other productions like Abzu, and I've got a lot of great people in the hobby right now, collaborating with a couple efforts we've got going right now, but it doesn't always happen just on the tabletop or in this little miniature realm. There's a lot of cool live action stuff going on out there that I would love to inject into this and make it just a big huge mixed media, something hopefully nobody's seen yet, and if so, that's fine. I'm doing it because I love doing it. It's therapy and meditation for me.
That's cool. I love that. Can you talk a little bit more about like the collaborative process? Maybe starting with, did you ever run into any like situations where there was just like a disagreement about what the world should look like and how you handled that?
If there was, it doesn't stand out to me, and I don't remember it. I think we discussed how things would look, but ultimately, I like to provide a framework for people and let them kind of jam and do their own thing. And I listen to their thoughts when they're kind of spilling what they want to do. And I'm, if there's something in there that I'm upfront and honest. There's no other way to be than honest, and that's always the best policy. And I'll say right up from the get go is like, hey man, if I am in left field, way too left or way too right, you just tell me, and vice versa. And the great thing about those people and anybody, and I did this with Cody with his Gelita. That was my first foray into the 28, was contributing to the Gelita Ice World setting. I think within our little community, everybody is very respectful of what somebody is creating. So they know I know when I step in a Gelita or Tormageddon or an Ex Profundus or an Iron Sleet, I'm going to be catering to what they have built and created for that setting. I'm not going to go totally off the rails and do something of my own to disrupt that. We're not going to go throwing Teletubby looking things into a Thorn's Moon Crusade or a Pilgrim. That would, to me, that would be just a little disrespectful. Now, I get sometimes things happen that people like their styles and they want to put that into it, and that's great. I dig that. As long as you're catering to the setting, more power to you. And I think that's seen with some Salvatore stuff. As there's some folks out there that have contributed that is like, wow, I would have not originally thought of that, or thought it's in the setting, but now that you've made that, I can totally see it being there. And so with the collaborative process of Abzu, there was probably times where we were going like, well, what about this? Or we were spitballing and throwing out ideas of like, how do they look sitting around the monolith? Or what does the cave entrance look like to the ship? And those things, we just worked it out naturally. And those guys were really great about making sure they kind of fit into the world we were building, and then, you've got Lunax over here that just makes cool shit that fits into anything. So, so it's like, that'll work. And Symptomatic, and Gareth, Symptomatic and that being on the life, those two guys are just, they've got great minds and they're very creative folks. So they definitely cater to.
That's it. How did you like use any tools to manage the production? Were you like, was it all through Google Docs, or were you?
Yeah, it was all through Google Docs and just our conversations on Instagram. And, that's something that I'm always, I won't say wrestling with, but always trying to improve on, is organization. Especially when you get to the scale of some of these things, like some of these big projects and some of these big world building efforts that are out there. Like, I don't know how they do it, And some of them you can see, some of the creators of those settings and those stories, that really, looking at it, that has to be their full-time job. There's no other way they can pump out that great and good of content. And I'm not knocking them for it. I can't afford that. I have a career, I have a life. This is a hobby after all of those. And so being organized is very important for me. And I've tried a couple of production and project management softwares, and ultimately it always falls back on a Google Doc, some sort of checklist that I have. And I'm a very personal collaborator. I like messaging people or getting on a hobby hangout, video chat. I tried out the Discord for a bit and realized I did it too early because I didn't have a good framework for people to go, oh, that's what this faction looks like, or, oh, that's what those vehicles are going to look like. And so that's where I ran into the whole, people were going way off in right field. I'm like, well, that's cool, but that's not really in the setting. There's not that walking around. So I think eventually I'll get back into a Discord channel. My next project right now is to keep things organized, and within that framework is to release a lore lookbook that's in the form of a Google Slides. So, cool. And I think once that happens, that'll at least take away the part of me having to, while I like it and I really enjoy doing it, of having these individual conversations all the time.
And lookbooks going to be like miniatures that you've kit bashed, and
they're slowly getting put in there. That's the problem I have right now is, and probably going to be a topic of debate. I'll get into that as to why, but because I've got everything on grayscale right now, I would say maybe only 10 or 15% of the collection is painted at this point. I don't have a lot of content to put into or that I would feel comfortable putting into a lore lookbook. I just don't want to put gray plastic in there. Remember back in the day, and they may still do this, I haven't opened a GW Codex in so long, but back when I played, they would always have the first 30, 40, 50 pages of just artist imagery, Adrian Smith, John Blanche, all those artists up front. And then they have rules in there. And then at the back, or maybe in a portion of it, they'd have, oh, here's the miniature section of it. Here's what the miniatures look like. I'm taking that approach. And so I'm using artwork. Controversially, probably for some people, I'm using AI generated art. and we can get in that whole topic. I have a very understanding stance on it, but it is a tool that is allowing me to world build. Whereas otherwise, I would, at this point, with how much art I have and how much time I put into it, I would have spent tens of thousands of dollars getting somebody to make that stuff for me. So as touchy as a topic as it is, and as much as I feel and love the artist out there, it is a tool that I'm using, and I'm not afraid to say it. That being said, I still reach out if I see somebody, and I'm doing it as we speak. I do reach out to artists and ask them, hey, I have this going on. It looks like something you're doing similarly. Would you like to contribute? So I'm always thrilled, and I would prefer having actual artists do some stuff, but I also do understand that it's not always conducive to lifestyles to work for free. So there's that balancing act there. And I hope people are receptive to the lore lookbook. I've got a handful of contributors in there right now looking at it, and everybody, at least the people that have come back and commented on it, have been floored about it and very, very receptive of it. So even a couple that have said, hey, up until this point, I haven't been really cool with AI generated art, but what you're doing here, it makes sense because I'm all putting it towards one setting. And I'll tell you, it's not easy. Like for every one image that I put into this lookbook, I guarantee you there are 2-3 dozen variations of that to get that to that point. So, and it's still not perfect. You know, a lot of the miniatures are closely resemble some of this stuff. But the cool thing that I like about it is, like for instance, Gareth, at that being on the line, he is jumping back in and contributing. He just posted up his little warband that he's doing using some really cool bolt action World War II miniatures with these Silent Hill triangle heads. I forget what that character's called. But he's fashioned his own little, and I was able to like recreate that in this generated imagery, and that's going into the lookbook now. So he's going to have his own little section, and ultimately that's what I would like to do is have each or most of these contributors, you know, make something, and then we can put that into the codex, into the lookbook. So, and that's what's fun. And then taking these later to a convention or an invitational and putting them on the field. And I even let, you know, he's naming them, him and Symptomatic Chaos have named their people that they put into the setting. And a lot of people do that with their collaborative efforts. But that, to me, that's an enjoyment of, you're giving a little piece contributing to my creation. So
that's cool. Yeah. That's like the idea of a lookbook I haven't seen before. Is that something that is going around?
You know, that's a good question. And I guess I can't believe I haven't thought of that before. I think people have done it in different ways. Oh, well, you know, Max from Turn Up 28, he kind of does something in similar fashion. The Iron Sleet guys had their, it was Ex Profundus, had their website there for a while. And I think that's really kind of what like lent well to me of like, okay, they put up this imagery, and people can go look at that and reference that and say, okay, I get what they're going for here. You know,
that's cool.
And again, pointing back, selfishly, it's just something I enjoy doing. I've got artists in the family that, you know, I draw from, and it's another creative effort that I genuinely like sitting down here and just tossing together some lore. And I put a lot of lore and background into this. So
that's awesome. Is there anything that we haven't touched on that you just feel needs to get said? Or
no, I think what I just want to say is just thanks for letting me come and share my passion and my little bit of creativity. And I'm always very appreciative of the community and what we've created here. Everybody's, you know, we're a group of people doing a niche of a niche, and we're just owning it, having a lot of fun with it. And I think, I hope we get to spread that across the greater community of, you know, hobbyists of miniature wargaming, of creators, because I think, and I've dabbled in this with a couple other artists. here recently, and I think that's it. Is we need to start being proud or comprehending the fact that we are dabbling in art. This is an art form to some regards, and I'm not saying we're painting Mona Lisas here or anything. Don't get me wrong there. I'm just saying what we're doing here is a creative aspect, a creative approach, and I think some people, myself included, that is the forefront of why I enjoy this, is because it's art, and I get to inject myself into that. So to anybody who's out there doing it, and who, somebody who just started doing it or looking at this stuff, and I once did this with, the dark text and the weirding ways and the iron sleetes. I looked at it and said, oh my God, these people making this art out there. How do I do this? How do I even start there? And it's just reaching out in the community, reaching out to those people you look up to and saying, hey, how did you do this? We're always happy to share and say, oh, this is how you build this, or how you would do this. And getting involved in the community and making art is just what's really fucking cool about this whole space.